So, around a month ago, we received word that we'd be getting a Halo Combat Evolved remake. So, I just thought I'd switch gears a little bit today and talk about what I'd like to see from this remake, how to improve upon the original Halo Combat Evolved, and how to improve upon the franchise as a whole. So first off, for some clarification here, when I say remake, I'm talking like this is the Resident Evil 4 kind of remake, where it actually takes a similar premise from the original, but expands upon it immensely. And I will say that the Resident Evil 4 remake is essentially the top notch of remakes. This is what we're shooting for here. But, moving on to my first improvement on making this remake, and this is a major one for me, is don't add needless things just because you can. I feel like this is something that modern games do a lot, is add features for the sake of adding features. The original Halo Combat Evolved holds up incredibly well to today's standards, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have its faults with some lack of content, and that's to be expected of a gaming franchise that's been around for as long as Halo has. But that should be a main focus, is to add content that is necessary for a better, more expansive gaming experience in contrast to the original. And don't add needless aspects just because you can. And that applies to my next idea. Do not by any means change the soundtrack in this remake. Halo CE's soundtrack is perfect on virtually every level, and it'd be criminal if they changed the soundtrack, and made it worse and butchered it. That alone would have the Halo community in an outcry, as music is one of the main parts of the Halo game franchise, and it's an aspect that makes the games so recognizable. Like, you can't say that this doesn't make you feel nostalgic for Halo 3, whether you've played the game or not. Music has always had an integral role in Halo, and I would hate it if they butchered or changed the music up too much just for the sake of change. The next idea I have is just to keep all the original weapon sound effects in the game. There is no reason to switch up these whatsoever. It'll keep the samey feel of the original Halo Combat Evolved to not do it any disservice, and it would be more of a hassle for the developers to work on rather than just reusing the original sound effect assets from Halo Combat Evolved. And speaking of original, please do not recast the original voice actors. If we can, and I know this is a big if, try to bring back every voice actor from Halo Combat Evolved. This is a very tall task, and I know it's unrealistic, but if we can get these same iconic voice actors to come back and voice their characters they played that pioneered gaming, then that would already give this remake more credibility and would give older Halo fans more faith in this newer project. So now we're going to be moving on to the campaign and or story aspects of this remake. And the first thing that we absolutely have to see with this is to fill in the gaps in between levels. And don't worry, there's plenty of source material in the books and comics. Or maybe give some side stories. For example, maybe show us some more info on what happened in 343 Guilty Spark in between the time Johnson's team were leaving and the time they arrived. Or maybe give us a completely new story based on one of the books. And here's one that I feel would fit super well into here, is the story of Private Wallace Jenkins. The story where his flood infection went sideways and he wasn't fully infected, so he is on the brink of death, living in agony, sharing his mind and body with another life form. A story like this would truly show how horrifying the flood is, and it would set the tone for the flood encounters and how you view them in the rest of the playthrough. Or something of that capacity, you get it. Just filling in more and fleshing out the story and background a little more for better world building. While it may not seem like a big deal, I can promise you that having these extra bits of info in between main levels gives a whole new level of character and creative writing into the game. Plus, it will allow for better transitions into the next level. And please, whoever's developing this game, please include the story of Private Wallace Jenkins or Marvick McBudo. It fits so incredibly well into a remake for Halo Combat Evolved and would give a horror feel and would show that Halo isn't afraid to pull its punches. And speaking of pulling its punches, in this remake, I need it to be rated M for mature. None of this T for teen stuff. I want there to be as much blood and gore as there was in the original Halo Combat Evolved. Maybe even more. I just want this Halo to feel like the older Halo games again, where they weren't afraid to hold back on gore and violence. There's no reason why we should have a T for teen rating for the game that first features the Flood. And speaking of that, I want the Flood to be horrific. I want this remake to capture that same suspense as the original, and crank that horror dial up to the max. The horror aspect was fantastically executed in Halo Combat Evolved, but if this remake can do a modern adaptation of that with a scarier element, then that would be absolutely amazing. And honestly, I think that's the thing I want most from this game. I mean, to be fair, we haven't seen the Flood in a mainline Halo game for about 17 years, and so it needs to be done right. They don't need to reinvent the wheel here. All they need to do is just to simply do something similar to what Combat Evolved did, but make it even more suspenseful and more horrific thanks to this modern age of gaming where things look more realistic than ever. And speaking of which, with this new age in technology, we need this team to go all out on the designs for weapons, landscapes, skyboxes, everything. Halo is known for having incredibly iconic and memorable designs, and I don't want them to pull a Halo Infinite here where every environment is the same and where there's a bunch of ugly silver pillars. I want this remake to have character and care in its biomes, designs, and once more, even its skyboxes of all things. Another thing I would love to see done in this campaign is to slowly introduce us more to the Arbiter. He would have a lot of story relevance and would show us how he came into his role in the Covenant fleet. And don't worry, there's also plenty of source material to go off of on how to execute this. But you may be asking, why would we use comics and books that already exist to retell a story? Well, it's because most fans don't read these pieces of media, and even so, linking these into the games would help string future storylines together, like Halo 2's storyline with Halo Combat Evolves. While these two are obviously super connected, having the Arbiter introduced in this remake would really help bring these two stories and plots together. Do I just want to see my favorite Halo character in another game? Yes, but it also makes a ton of sense, and it has incredible story relevance. Now, on to some gameplay requests I have. First off, please don't overcomplicate the movement. I don't want a sprinting mechanic, it's just not needed. Plus, if they had a sprinting mechanic, I feel like it would take away from the horror aspect of the Flood. Why fear them when you can just run like Usain Bolt? It would make no sense, and would actually hinder the gameplay experience. And along those lines, please don't take away any weapons. I'm fine with adding new weapons into the game, but just please don't take any out of the game. Keep all the original weapons from Combat Evolved and transfer them into this remake. Something I would want, however, is akimbo weapons. I feel like this is a gameplay mechanic that would help this remake out significantly, and would help retain newer and older fans of the franchise alike. Something else we need is to rework a couple things. First is the enemy AI, obviously. If the AI is more responsive to your attacks, then it can make for some very interesting gameplay shifts, especially with the Flood. If you engage with the Flood, then I want them to start rampantly rushing towards me, but yet to also still have some intelligence with their attacks. If they can somehow find a way, I would love it to when you shoot off a limb of a combat Flood form, for it to start rushing at you and just start hitting you with its head. While the other Flood combat forms that have weapons are fast, but they keep their distance until you shoot off their arms, then they rush you. We also need to rework the physics, as sometimes in this game when you jump it feels unresponsive. So in this, I want it to where when you jump, it's like Halo 2 or 3, where it responds perfectly. And maybe slightly rework the vehicles as they feel very cartoonishly bouncy. Maybe have them be a little more grounded, but other than that, there's not really much to rework in this remake. And then, just for some side details, something that would be amazing is to also have in terminals again in this remake. Show what is happening with the traitors of the Covenant, and how they escaped. Show us more of the 343 Guilty Spark's thoughts and how lonely he was having all that time by himself. Show us the squad of ODSTs that helped destroy the Truth and Reconciliation and what exactly happened. Show us more of the Flood reveal. They can do so much if they execute this properly. And once again, they can tie in more books and comic stories through these terminals to expand the world more and more. And so that way, they can maybe make some future projects out of these stories. But anyways, let me know how you'd make this remake down in the comments below, and what you think of my takes, and how maybe we can expand upon them. But now it's time for shoutouts. So if you don't know, at the end of all my videos, I shout out a creator who I think is severely underrated or underappreciated. And today's creator is none other than Sir Midas. Sir Midas is coming into the YouTube space with a goal in mind, to make entertaining and unique Fortnite content. So please go over and show some love and drop this man a sub. Link for the channel will be in the description. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching, and as always, have a lovely night.